Jai Gurudev, everybody. Welcome back to the live stream lecture on Hinduism. Today we're gonna look at the second part of Hinduism, diversity in a unity, or plurality in a unity. And before we start, I would like to make a short summary from last time. So last time we have looked firstly at the foundation of Hinduism. Foundation of Hinduism, I made the analogy of a tree having some roots and a trunk which unifies everything, which nourishes the tree, the branches and the fruits afterwards. These roots and this trunk, I have said, in Hinduism we could say is composed of 8 elements. Those 8 elements are, I repeat it in a sentence which we have told last time to get the idea. I am an Atma, a spiritual being, a divine self, number 1. I am seeking to attain Brahman, the highest reality, second one. I am limited by the law of karma, the law of action and reaction, third one. Through that law, I'm in a physical reality, which is fourth, physical reality, Jagat or Shrishti Pralaya, a constant cycle of creation and dissolution. In that circle, I go through the cycle of reincarnation, samsara is number 5. By living according to a righteous living, according to Dharma, the righteous way of living, which is number 6, I can now dissolve my karma and finally attain moksha, number 7. All of these processes are guided by the spiritual master, the guru, the enlightened beings, the divine incarnations, which come to this earth to guide us on this path to final realization, is the 8th factor. These 8 factors we have seen last time to say this is the unifying point of Hinduism, what unifies all Hindus or most of the Hindus, where most of them would probably agree that these factors are part of their tradition. Okay, so that was the starting point to see what is the unifying factor, to then go into diversity. Before we went into the diversity, we have looked shortly at the history. We have seen how many different historical events have happened in India. We have started in the moment when Krishna left this world about 5,000 years ago, because of course, as Hinduism is Sanatana Dharma, this eternal, universal, cosmic law, we couldn't find a real beginning, because if it's eternal, it always has existed. So we started with the leaving of this world from Krishna, the time when Kali Yuga, this Iron Age, has entered. Corruption has entered with it. The priestly caste and so on, everybody got more and more corrupt. So other traditions have started, like Buddhism and Jainism. Then after that, after they became very prominent, more and more the Vedic traditions got again promoted by great sages, different movements, Bhakti movements, and so on and so on. Then the Muslim invasion, which was like about 800 years, a lot of destruction, a lot of death. Then the British occupation, which was basically destroying it by the root, or trying to uproot this Hindu culture by implementing a different educational system. And then the liberation of India through Gandhi in 1947. So we have looked at that just to have the idea, to see like so many different influences have happened in India over the centuries, over the last few millennia, and therefore we see such a diversity, and partly also is it a reason why many Hindus don't really know anymore what the richness of their tradition is, but have just a little taste because of a tradition, or because they grow up in that tradition. Yeah. So when we go to India, we might see a lot of chaos and people who don't really know what their lifestyle is about, but that has also to do with this point of history. Okay, then we have brought forth one of the key verses in the Hindu tradition. One of the key verses is from the Rig Vedas, which says Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, saying there's one truth, and the wise speak of this one truth in many different ways. This is a very beautiful verse, which I think gives us a nice idea of Hinduism in general. We have said that is, we see in this verse the unifying factor, one truth, one reality, one God, which then reveals itself in many ways. Many scriptures, many philosophies, many deities. Yeah, that is described in that. I've made the example of the elephant and the four blind people which approach the elephant. Everybody perceives a part of the elephant, but nobody perceives the fullness of the elephant. Okay, starting from there, we have now gone into details of this diversity. So we have spoken about the unifying factor, and now we have started to go into the diversifying factor. The diversifying factor, we have firstly stated that there is a different structure of Hinduism where there's different traditions. We have mentioned Vaishnavism, Saivism, Shaktism, Smartism. So different traditions which have different scriptures as their authority, which have different forms of God or aspects of God as their highest supreme being, and we have seen in that already a diversity. Yeah, this is like, if we now take again this tree, this would have been the branches now which come forth from this roots and this trunk. That was the first point we have spoken. Then we have seen the different aspects of God, the different concepts of God. God with form, God without form, God with attributes, without attributes, all present within Hinduism. God, a monotheistic tradition, one God, or a polytheistic, many gods, more than 300 million gods. Nevertheless, still many saying they all are part of one reality. Is God just the nature pervading all the nature, so being a pantheism, or is it being in the nature and even beyond, transcending this material reality, which would be panentheism? All of this we have covered and looked at. Is God seated within everybody? That is an idea. Is God incarnating in this world as a manifestation, an avatar? And if yes, how many of them have been incarnating? Who is an avatar? Who is a divine incarnation? All of this are ideas and diversified factors which we find in Hinduism. Like I said last time, we have not concluded. I have merely presented different ideas to show that there's a huge diversity from one extreme to the other extreme, and both are present within the same tradition called Hinduism, very beautifully, peacefully living together. After the concepts of God, we have gone into the point of the different paths to moksha, the different paths of liberation. We have spoken about different yoga paths, karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, dhyana yoga, so the path of renouncing the fruits of your action, karma yoga, the path of contemplation, jnana yoga, the path of love and devotion, or prapatti, surrender, taking refuge, the path of meditation, raja yoga, or ashtanga yoga, the 8-limb path. And again, just to show many different traditions, many different approaches and paths present in one tradition. Then we have spoken about Tantra. Tantra not being related only to the sexual aspect, which often we think in the Western tradition, but Tantra being actually a spiritual science which divinizes the material reality through incantation, mantras, through mudras, different physical postures, through yantras, geometrical forms which carry a certain vibration, and through all of this the material reality gets divinized. We've said that the ritualistic worship, puja and so on, is a form of Tantra. The practices of meditation like Atma Kriya Yoga we do in Bhakti Marga, where you work on the chakras and with the Kundalini Shakti and so on, all of these are forms which are included in Tantra, and not just a sexual aspect, which often is misconceived in the West, being Tantra. Yeah, this was the almost last point which we have touched. We have then seen actually the social aspects, and there's actually where we're gonna start today, or just summarize and carry on. The social aspects we have spoken shortly last time. We have said that there is 4 different ashramas, 4 different social aspects, stages of life, if you want to say. The first stage being the student stage, where normally a person went to an ashram to learn from a teacher for about 12 years to learn all the kind of sciences. Then the grihasta stage, where somebody was a householder. After that, somebody goes in the Varna stage, where there's a withdrawing from responsibilities, from social responsibilities. And finally, Sanya stage, where you renounce completely to seek highest realization. Like I already mentioned, these 4 stages of life are connected with 4 different goals of life. So the 4 different goals of life are dharma, so righteousness. That is mainly in the first stage of life, when you are a student, or brahmachari traditionally called, where you lived with your guru, where he has taught you all the sciences of this world. But besides that, he has also mainly given you the dharmic principles. And as we have said before, dharma is one of these foundational principles which will help us to grow spiritually and finally attain moksha, liberation. Yeah, so this is a very important factor which was imparted to the student. Once the student has learned that, he goes to the householder life. In a householder life, he or she seeks different goals like artha and kama. Artha being the richnesses, wealth, and kama being desire, pleasures. So we can see that artha and kama is not something which is condemned in the Hindu tradition. No, it is part of life, and of course these ideas are connected with dharma always. So wealth connected with righteousness, desirous and pleasurous life connected with righteousness. That is what we have spoken last time. Now you have fulfilled your social aspects, your family life, your children have grown up, they are getting ready to enter into the second stage of householder. Now you are ready to exit that and retreat from the social responsibilities, and you enter the vanaprastha stage, where you now renounce more and more these riches, wealths and desires, and enter and focus more on a spiritual goal. Prepare yourself for complete renunciation, and finally to attain the 4th goal, moksha, liberation from the cycle of birth and death. And that is normally, traditionally, how it is seen and presented. Then we have said in some traditions there's a 5th goal, which is called Bhakti, pure love for God. That is a goal which is not traditionally everywhere present, but many traditions have that as the final goal. Also in our tradition, in Bhakti Marga, that's the highest goal, where it is said pure unconditional love for God you will only be able to have once you are free from every karma, once you have attained moksha, once you have attained liberation from this I, mine and me. Only then pure unconditional love for God is truly possible. Yeah, this was the final thing what we have discussed last time. I just wanted to add on that point the idea of what is this practically helpful, because otherwise it's a nice to know fact of the Hindu tradition, but there's a nice factor in this social system, because what we see in our social system nowadays, especially in the West, is that people are mainly focused on wealth and desires. Fulfill your desires, get as much wealth as possible. That is a goal which most of the people have and which society encourages you to pursue. But the thing is, once you get older, sickness and finally death is a given. Yeah, so as time passes, you will not be able to have to fulfill all your desires and to enjoy your wealth, because this vehicle of body will just decay slowly. So if you don't start to get to a spiritual goal, to a higher spiritual goal, to the idea that there is even a spiritual reality, then you have the situation like you have often nowadays, where people, once they get old, they are more a burden to the family. They are being put in old people's home, and they are not finding any satisfaction anymore, because they don't know what they should do now. If you don't have a goal anymore, you don't know where to go. And this intrinsic goals being rooted in a tradition, so that you have them always in the back of your mind, is a very beautiful part of your life, where once you get older, automatically these thoughts of seeking a higher realization will or might awaken. Yeah, the possibility is just bigger than when you have never heard of those concepts. And that was how it was in olden times, when kings then have left their kingdom, retired to the forests to seek spiritual enlightenment, or when people have, after serving the family, the society, the ashrams, retired to an ashram to seek enlightenment. There have been people which then, living in an ashram, are inspiration for the younger generation, which can share a lot of life experience. So they have a great value, and they don't become without value and rather a burden like it is often nowadays. These are just some thoughts why this system is a very beautiful system, if we keep some of those ideas in maybe our daily life also. And of course, always to connect it with Dharma, with a righteous, ethical way of living. Yeah. So these were the social aspects, and now we actually go into the next points for today. Diversity in a unity. Today we start with the philosophies. So like I said in the first section, where we made a small comparison to other traditions, where we have said Hinduism doesn't have a single founder, it doesn't have a single scripture, it doesn't have a single philosophy, like for example the Abrahamic traditions, but they have many. Now we can see, for example, the 6 main philosophies, the so-called Shadarshana, which means like to see, darshana, to see or to know. They are the main ones. Of course, there's other categories below that, many of them. So let's see first which one we have. The first one, which you see on this slide, being Vedanta. Vedanta is the philosophical teachings of the Vedas, mainly the Upanishads, We will speak about that in the next session when we gonna have an overview of the Hindu scriptures. But the Vedas, yes, they are one of the most authoritative scriptures, and they are compiled in different sections, and the last section of them are the Upanishads, which contain all these philosophical concepts, and from there the ideas are drawn, so that are called Vedanta philosophies. The second one which we have is yoga, and yoga is not as we know it often in the West, where it is a Tuesday evening and Thursday evening for 1 hour practice, but yoga is a style of life where it is about practices which are designed to attain Atman Anubhavan. Atma Anubhavan meaning self-realization. Realization of this Atma, of this self. Yeah, yoga meaning in itself to unify what? This limited way of what we think we are with the unlimited who we truly are. Yeah, so a very important philosophy, yoga, which everybody knows. Yeah, again, you can see the whole world knows about yoga, but very rarely people associate it to Hinduism. Then the third one is Sankhya. Sankhya is the division of Purusha and Prakriti. So what is Purusha? Purusha is a spiritual reality or the spiritual being, and Prakriti is the material reality or the material substance. So this division of those two, and actually the analysis, the evaluation and the analysis, we could translate Sankhya itself as analysis. So Sankhya philosophy, which was founded by Kapila Muni, is mainly doing an analysis between a spiritual reality and a material reality. Very important and often mentioned also in the Bhagavad Gita. Then the fourth one, the Mimamsa philosophy, which is now a ritualistic process, a ritualistic approach as a means to salvation. In the Mimamsa philosophy, you see a lot of rituals, fire ceremonies, and so on for material gains, for invoking rain, for getting a better harvest, but also finally to attain salvation. Yeah, so a ritualistic approach, a philosophy which takes the ritualistic approach, the Mimamsa philosophy. Then number 5 is the Nyaya. Nyaya philosophy is logic and reason. Logic and reason to deduce the truth. We can see already when we hear logic and reason are main factors for modern science. Yeah, and normally that's a big critical point for religions, that they are superstitious and so on. But we can see that actually thousands of years ago these philosophies existed already in the Hindu tradition, and Nyaya, using the logic, using the reason, has existed already then. Like even before Aristotle, who has started, basically who is the one in the West which is known, Greek philosopher, who has spoken about the logos, which is the word, and then through them has developed this logical thinking. Even before that, Nyaya philosophy has already existed in the Indian tradition. So a very scientific, very rational approach, and very important, because you will see often in these philosophies they are not separated completely, but often they are flowing with each another. Like you use the logic, the Nyaya ideas to decipher something from the Vedantic philosophy, and so on and so on. So you use the different approaches to go deeper in these different philosophies. Okay. And last, number 6 is Vaisheshika. Vaisheshika being the atomist approach to deduce the truth. Again, a very scientific approach, and again, very beautiful to see how rich Hindu tradition is since thousands of years. Yeah, if we look, you hear here atomistic approach to deduce the truth. So in Vaisheshika, we Kanada Kashyapa, who has spoken about that in the Vaisheshika Sutras, he really goes into the atomic approach and says, once you understand how the smallest particle functions, you can translate it to the biggest particle. And like that, they try to deduce the truth to understand the highest reality. But now we have to understand, when did those sages live? When was this philosophy again promoted? Thousands of years ago. Like the records even from Western scholars say it is in the first millennia BC. If we look at modern science, the concept of the atom was only brought up in the 1800s by John Dalton, a British chemist who worked on it, and he took also ideas from the Greek, because the Greek, yes, there was a great philosopher, Democritus. He was already speaking about the atom. He was thinking, what if I cut a substance into smaller and smaller pieces? Like if I take an apple and I cut it smaller and smaller and smaller till I come to the smallest particle, and he called this the atomos. But even before Democritus, there was Kashyapa, who spoke about the atomistic approach in the Indian tradition, in the Hindu tradition. So again, such a richness which many people don't know about it, that actually these foundational pillars of science itself, they are in Hinduism. Yeah, when we say Hinduism superstition, that is absolute nonsense. Hinduism is very deeply philosophical, very rational, partly as far as rationality can go, because you can't understand something which is beyond the rational understanding. But otherwise, it is very important to have also a certain logic. Yeah, it's even said, without having a certain base of logic, you will never understand philosophies like Vedanta and so on and so on. So very beautiful to see how rich the Hindu philosophies, the Hindu tradition is. And here we just see different ones: Vedanta, Yoga, Sankhya, Mimamsa, Nyaya, and Vaisheshika. And just to add one point to the last lecture, because as I said, in the last lecture we spoke about the different concepts which we have in the Hindu tradition, if it's monotheistic, one god, or polytheistic, if it's pantheism or if it's panentheism. We can see now that there's even a further aspect, yeah? Because if we just take certain of those philosophies, like if we just take Sankhya, purely Sankhya from Kapila Muni, or if we take purely yoga idea, they are in essence actually atheistic. They are atheistic, they don't even mention God. It is afterwards also, when Krishna speaks about it, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he enters into it, he brings the concept of God into it, because of course it is present there, it's the foundational ground of everything. But just from a philosophical approach, there's even atheistic approaches within the Hindu sphere. And again, we can see a huge diversity in a unity. Very beautiful to see. Yeah. So next point. The next point, the caste system. The caste system, which is a very big controversy. Yeah, if you hear ever speaking about Hinduism in some countries, Western countries, where there's no understanding of what Hindu Dharma or Sanatana Dharma, this eternal universal religion, is, they will always come back to this caste system, how unfair it is, how discriminating it is. Yeah, and of course, if we look at India, where this system was applied in the last centuries, we could agree. Yeah, but now we have to understand, okay, is the system really something bad, or is the people who apply it at fault? Yeah, because we have said, once Krishna has left this world, Kali Yuga has entered. Certain corruption has entered into the mind of people. That's why other traditions have started. Yeah, the Gnostic, the non-Vedic traditions like Buddhism and Jainism, because Brahmanas, and so on, they were getting corrupt. Kshatriyas, kings, and so on, were getting corrupt. So let's see, what is this Varna system? Yeah, caste system actually called the Varna system, composed of 4 different castes. The 4 different castes, the first one being the Brahmanas. The Brahmanas being priests, intellectuals, and teachers. The second caste being the Kshatriyas. Kshatriyas being princes, kings, politicians, governors, rulers, warriors. Yeah, that's the second caste, the Kshatriyas. Then the third caste being the Vaishyas. The Vaishyas now taking care of the commercial aspect, entrepreneurs, trade, farmers, merchants, and so on and so on. And the last one, the Shudras. The Shudras being the laborers, unskilled workers, which do all kind of manual work. Well, if we just take this idea, then we can actually see a kind of caste system. This is actually a way to have a society which functions, because you need different roles to be executed so that the whole society can function. And if we look at any society, even European society or anywhere in the world, you can see that you have different classes. You don't call them castes, but you have people, you have workers, then you have politicians, then you have the clergy maybe, then you have the upper class, the high class, the rich people, yeah, and so on and so on. Different classes of people, good or bad, let it be. But there is always in a society a certain classification. If we say it or if we don't say it, that is just a fact. You need people who execute certain things. You need people who think about certain things. And that is what the caste system was actually made for. Yes, the caste system is mentioned in the ancient scriptures, like the Purusha Suktam, the Gita, the Mahabharata, Ramayana, and so on. But again, if you take, for example, the Purusha Suktam, which is a glorification of the Purusha, of the supreme personal deity, Narayana Krishna, there is said that the Brahmanas are like the mouth of God. The Kshatriyas, the warriors, the kings, the rulers are like the hands of God. The Vaishyas are like the thighs and the feet of God, or the legs of God. And the Shudras are like the feet. If we take it from there, we could say, yes, there is a clear distinction and a clear hierarchy. The feet are low and the head is high, which we can take it like that. Nevertheless, if we take the image of Sriman Narayana, the Supreme Lord lying inclined on Adishesh, his divine bed, well, if you are in a horizontal, your legs and your head is actually at the same height. So it's not about what is higher and what is lower. They are all equal to some extent. There is a difference in the duties, the difference in what they have to do. But it's not a classification of necessarily being more important or less important, which I have to qualify, because of course, if you take the body and you remove your head, your body will probably be deprived of life itself. If you cut off your foot, then you might still function. In the same way, if you have a culture or a society which has no intellectual, which has not the right values, the sages which give the right understanding of the world and the meaning of life and dharma, righteousness, how should society function and how should we live, then if that is missing, that has definitely a bigger impact into the whole society than if workers are now being corrupt or not proper. Yeah, so there is a certain level of importance from up to down. Nevertheless, if you take that body being on one level, they are equal but not the same, if you want to say. But nevertheless, the caste system, the Varna system, is still a big controversy, and one of the main points for controversy is actually the fact that some people think you are born in a certain caste and therefore you are stuck in that, which I would actually refute, but we will look in a minute about it on that. Let's just first look at the other points. We have here the jatis also, which are occupational social groups. Yeah, jatis are also affecting Christians and Muslims. I think in nowadays India, we will, when even we speak about the caste system, it's mainly related to the jatis, social groups, working groups. There's more than 3,000 different jatis, different social groups, and there's big debates about that. And then the Dalits, which are the untouchable, those who don't fit in any of those concepts. Yeah, just to conclude this slide. And now coming back to the point, is now these different castes, are they related to birth or are they related to qualities? Well, if I refer to my spiritual master Paramahamsa Vishwananda, he clearly says it's mainly related to qualities. Yes, there is a part which is related also to birth, because like Bhagavan Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, one of the holy scriptures, that according to your karma, you will incarnate in a certain family, which will help you to grow further to your perfection. Yeah, so of course your karma has an influence in where you are born. Therefore, yes, birth has something to do. Does it mean that if you show certain qualities, you are not able to now live in a different lifestyle? I would say no. My Gurudev also says no. And if we look what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, we will clearly see that also he says no to it. 18 verse 42, that serenity and restraint, self-discipline, purity, forbearance, integrity, wisdom, insight and faith in the Vedas, all this constitute the functions of the Brahmanas based on their inherent disposition. So this is quite clear. He is speaking purely about qualities. So a Brahmana, one of these highest classes, is somebody who has a serenity, self-restraint, self-discipline, purity, forbearance, integrity. Like these are saintly qualities which somebody is cultivating. If you don't cultivate those qualities, then the question if you are a Brahmana is really questionable. Often if you're in India, I experienced myself, probably if you have been in India or if you're Indian yourself, you can see it very often. People call themselves, oh, I'm a Brahmana, but the moment somebody doesn't look, they might go to the first liquor shop and eat meat and whatever and abuse other people. This is not in accordance to what Krishna says. It is about qualities. It's the same like my father. If my father is a carpenter and I am born to my father, I'm not automatically a carpenter, right? I have to first develop the skills for it. then I can call myself a carpenter. Further, what is he saying? Valor, power, determination, proficiency and courage in battle, generosity and leadership are the inherent characteristics of a kshatriya. Yeah, again, qualities. What are the qualities of a warrior, of a ruler, a righteous king who lives for the people, like Lord Rama, and so on? These are qualities which he mentions. And lastly, he mentions agriculture, cattle breeding, and trade are the innate vocations of the Vaishyas, and the duty of the Shudras is service arising from their innate disposition. Yeah, so the cattle breeding, agriculture, trade, and so on, those qualities, they are connected with the Vaishya, and service, general service to the whole society, is connected to the Shudras. So I think this is a very clear statement which Krishna makes in the Bhagavad Gita. And just one final point to see why this system can actually be very helpful, a positive aspect of it, even though, like I said, it is being abused very much by the society nowadays, is if you take nowadays society again, you can see that everybody needs to be somebody. Everybody wants to be either an IT expert or a lawyer or a doctor. Yeah. Especially when you have a Western mindset. In America, there was once made a survey from people between 16 and 25. A few 100,000 people have been questioned, and there was different options which they could cross on, so about what they would like to achieve in their life. And one point was to be rich and famous, and it was very clearly classified. What does it mean to be rich and famous? 99% of the questioned people have said, I would like to be rich and famous, of course. Now they have made another survey where they have now analyzed how many people are actually in that age or later on, which in the whole population get to a state of being rich and famous according to this classification. And the conclusion is 1% actually becomes rich and famous according to this this setting, how they have put it, meaning that 98% of the people are already subscribing for their failure. So you have had the idea, I want to achieve that, but you're not meant for that, and therefore you have failed in life. And that is what we see often today. People get big ambitions or get a big pressure from society. You have to be this or this or this, and then when you don't achieve it, then there's actually what coming, a depression, resentment in life, and so on. You often see it in the Indian tradition. There is to some extent still this idea there, well, if you're born, for example, in a farmer's family, there's nothing wrong with it to be a farmer. Yeah, you don't need to necessarily run away and become an IT man. And that is okay. In the West, that is not so much the case. Yeah, everybody wants to be somebody. And I'm just saying, if we have a clarity that actually where we are born, what if I'm born in a farmer's family, then maybe I can be a farmer. I don't have to, but there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah, so maybe these are thoughts which can also be helpful for our society to see that everything has its place. Yeah, you need every part of society to function nicely. These are just some food for thought where we see again the richness of Hindu Dharma and why these ideas can be very helpful also to keep ourselves balanced and the society balanced. Then we go to a nice concept, the concept of time. We will just go over it on a basic level because it's a very complex idea in the Hindu tradition, the concept of time. So time, like we said already in the first lecture, I think, when we compared Hinduism to other traditions, we have said that time in the Hindu tradition is not linear, yeah, like in Christian or Abrahamic faiths, where there's a beginning, God created everything, and then there's the end, yeah, the day of judgment. No, in the Hindu tradition, time is cyclic, so there is a beginning where everything is created, then it is maintained, and then it's dissolved, so a new creation can start. Like we have springtime, flowers are blooming, the gardener maintains them, winter time they all dissolve, go back to earth, and the new springtime comes. Yeah, so everything is cyclic. We have cosmic cycles, universal cycles, we have the seasons, and everybody has their personal cycles in life. So that's the first idea. Time is cyclic, not linear. Again, you can see Shrishti Pralaya. This was part of our foundational ideas, yeah, of these roots. The universal creation, the material creation, which is in a constant cycle, that was one of the parts of the roots. Before we go now to the second point of the yugas, of the cosmic time, I just want to give you an idea. There is different concepts of time in Hinduism. Yeah, so it starts with the really smallest particle. Time is defined to some extent like the aggregate of the smallest particle in space. So you can see that the definition of time in Hinduism is not something isolated, but it's matter in relation to space. The smallest particle, an atom, in a certain space, and then two atoms together, and then three atoms together in relation to that space, that creates different classifications of time. Yeah, so we have the gross time, the subtle time, and we have the cosmic time. So I'm just saying those points because, of course, they're not all listed, because, like I said, it's very complex, but also very intriguing and nice to dive a little bit into it, to see how these ancient scriptures, again, thousands of years ago, have already spoken about all of this in a very beautiful and very sophisticated way. So if we go now to the cosmic time, the yugas. Yeah, so we have 4 yugas: Satya, the golden age; Treta, the silver age; Dvapara, the bronze age; and Kali, the iron age. Those 4 yugas together are called Mahayuga. All 4 together combined will create one Mahayuga. If you remember, I have said in the last section and in the summary today that historically we have started when Krishna has left this physical plane and Kali Yuga, this iron age, has entered, has started. So Kali Yuga is where actually the consciousness of people is the lowest. It's most materialistic, most egoistic, in comparison to the golden age, to the Satya Yuga, where most people are enlightened, where this connection with the divine is for most people accessible, and so on and so on. So now we see a new factor. We have said time is the connection, the relation between matter and space, but now we can see it's matter in space and related to spiritual development, to spiritual realization. Okay, this is just some thoughts to put there, how unifying time was put forth. Yeah, we have the theme unity in the diversity, or pluralism in unity, and we can see it's everywhere. There's always this unifying factor, and that's so diverse, so much richness is in it. Now to get an idea of those yugas, to get an idea of time itself, so Kali Yuga, according to Vedic calculation, lasts about 432,000 years. And it has started with the leaving of this world of Krishna, which is about 5,000 years ago. So another 427,000 human years to go, just to get an idea when people speak that the golden age is at hand, according not to Vedic times. Of course, everybody has their own cycles also. So like Paramahamsa Vishwananda says, even if you're in Kali Yuga, you can personally be in Satya Yuga when you are spiritually inclined and so on. But this is a different theme. I'm now speaking generally. So 432,000 years. The Treta Yuga or the Dvapara Yuga is about the double of it. So we have now 864,000 years, yeah, and so on and so on. So a whole Mahayuga is about 4,320,000 human years. Just let that sink in a moment and reflect how old you are and how long this life seems to last already. And now just related to one Mahayuga, which is 4,320,000 years. That is one Mahayuga. So now, once you have digested that, now think of 1,000 of such cycles. 4,320,000 by 1,000. You make the maths. I don't know how to go, but it's a very big number. That is one day of Brahma, called a kalpa. Then there's a partial dissolution. Yeah. Every time the cycle is finished, there's a partial dissolution, and then there is the night of Brahma, which is again at such cycles. Again, 4,320,000 by 1,000. So this is one day and one night. 4,320,000 by 1,000 a day by 1,000 a night. So now a year of Brahma, Brahma, not Brahman, not the absolute ground of existence, but Brahma, the creator, God. A year of Brahma is 360 days. That number by 360, and a year, a Brahma, which is also created by the Supreme Being, lives for 100 years, for about 100 years. So I spare you the maths. This reaches to about a 300 trillion, 311.04 or something like that, trillion human years. It's just crazy. Yeah. And that is one life of Brahma. One life of Brahma, and then this is the time when Brahma leaves. That is the time when the Supreme Being Narayana once does inhales. So one life of Brahma is the time when the Supreme Divine Being Srimad Narayana inhales once. Just that we have an idea what is Hinduism speaking over time. I'm saying there's many subdivisions, manvantras and so on. We didn't go into them because I just wanted to get again an idea how huge this is, how diverse this is. Okay? And then we go to the last point for today, the last point being the concept of the Guru. A very beautiful concept, especially in the West. In some countries, this word is almost scary for people. Yeah, if you want to scare people off, often you just have to mention the word Guru because they think of sect. Yeah, which has nothing to do with it. The word Guru actually is two syllables. Gu meaning light, darkness, and Ru meaning light. So the one who brings light into darkness. Okay, so one who brings knowledge to the ignorant. A guru is a teacher. In the Indian tradition, Every teacher is called a guru. You're learning about dance, you have a dance guru. You're learning about music, you have a music guru. You learn about maths, you have a mathematic guru, and so on and so on. Our whole life is a constant process of learning. When we are born, our parents are our teachers, our gurus. Nature is our teacher, our guru. Animals can be our guru. Friends in school, everywhere we encounter guru-disciple relationship. Even you are a guru for certain people, because the moment you teach, you become a teacher. And so, of course, we have also the concept of the guru on the spiritual field. Yeah? On a physical field, even if you want to learn the most basic things, you need a teacher. If you want to learn about this body, you are not capable to learn so in one lifetime. You have to get specialized about the eyes, about the ears, about the particle of this body. And you need a teacher to teach you that. So when people think now, the highest spiritual realization, the self, the relationship with the divine, which is beyond everything, for that we don't need a teacher. That is just a little bit unlogical. So a spiritual reality is 1,000 times more magnificent than this material reality. And so often we get lost and forget about what it really is about, our life. So when we can get lost in such a simple reality, how much more is it dangerous in spiritual realities? Therefore, the necessity of having a spiritual master is very big. A spiritual master which guides us to the final realization. So this is just a general idea of the guru, like the prayer says, Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasurma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Please guide me from ignorance to knowledge, from darkness to light, and from death to eternal life. But the concept of the guru, like everything else in the Hindu tradition, has different approaches. So the guru tattva, the nature of the guru, varies between the different traditions. Yeah, so different traditions see the role of the guru differently. Then we have the idea of Guru Parampara. A Guru Parampara is a chain of succession. So where a master imparts the knowledge and the grace to the disciple, till that disciple is elevated to a master or a guru himself, which again imparts it to the disciple, and so on and so on. A chain of succession is created, which is called a parampara. Such a parampara then creates a sampradaya, sampradaya being a spiritual tradition. For those who don't know those concepts and mainly are in Christian tradition, even if you take the Christian concept, it is somehow a form of parampara. Jesus Christ, which has risen from the dead, and then the Holy Spirit has entered into the apostles, then they have gone out and have passed on this blessing, and through that the apostolic church has carried on, this blessing has been passed on, is a form of parampara, a form of sampradaya. In the Hindu tradition you have those concepts often, many times. Then the idea of a shiksha guru or a diksha guru. A diksha guru is somebody who gives initiation. Shiksha guru is somebody who is instructing. So there's different concepts about that. They can be both the same or separate. Again, I'm just presenting different options. I'm not concluding. Yeah. And finally, the last point, the Satguru. Satguru being a messenger of the ultimate, or even being a manifestation of God himself. Sat Guru, so Guru we have said, the one who guides from darkness into light, from the unknown to the known, or from ignorance to knowledge. and the word Sat, which is the word for truth, reality. So a real master, a real spiritual master, or somebody who knows the absolute reality, somebody who can guide you to the final reality. That's so-called Satguru. And again, there is different perceptions. Some saying that the Satguru is somebody who guides you. He's a messenger, prophet, or whatever, which guides people to the highest reality. And some which say he is God himself manifested, like an avatar. Again, if you are not familiar with those concepts and you look, for example, at Christianity, it's very beautiful to see, because before Christianity, in the Jewish tradition, there was no form of God, not even the name of God was being allowed to be mentioned. And now there came Jesus Christ, or Jesus of Nazareth, and what does he say? He says, I and the Father are one. Whoever sees me sees the Father. Whoever follows me reaches the Father. Well, these ideas are ideas which in the Hindu tradition have existed since thousands of years. That those beings, be it just a human being or be it a divine incarnation directly, the moment they are one in consciousness with the Supreme, in so-called Christ consciousness or Krishna consciousness, yeah, they are one with the Absolute. They are these tools, the imparters of grace, which finally can bring a soul to the ultimate realization. Yeah, so these concepts, again, you can see in different traditions if you want to see them. But again, these are just some points. The concept of Guru, again, very diverse, seen in the different traditions, even within Hinduism, very differently. So this was for today the second part of Hinduism, diversity in a unity, or plurality in a unity. Just short to sum up, we have spoken today, we have given a summary from the last lecture, then we have looked again at the stages of life, the 4 ashramas related with the 4 goals of life, Dharma being very essential, Dharma, the righteous behavior to finally attain moksha and, like some tradition says, Bhakti, pure love for God. Then we have spoken about the different philosophies, the 6 main philosophies. We have seen that there is a lot of scientific approach. We have seen that there is the Vedanta philosophy, which is very important, because also in Bhakti Marga we are following a Vedanta philosophy. We will see that on later sessions. We have seen the yoga philosophy also present within Bhakti Marga through Atma Kriya Yoga, the Kriya practices given by Paramahamsa Vishwananda and Mahavatar Babaji, and so on and so on. So then we have looked at the caste system, the Varna system. We have seen why it is such a controversial thing, but we also have seen that the system itself is not necessarily something bad if it's applied in the right way. I didn't mention, but for example, Sri Ramanuja Acharya, one of the founding Acharya of the Sri Sampradaya of our tradition, he was actually a devotee, being a Brahmana, he was actually a devotee of Kanchipurna, which was a Shudra. So seeing that love for God, spirituality transcends all those concepts, yeah, and it's about qualities, like Krishna describes nicely in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 18, verse 42 to 44. Then we have seen the concepts of time. We have seen how time is not just like a few thousand years back or even a few million years back, but it speaks about trillions and trillions of life, of years, human years, a eternal cycle. And of course that eternal cycle is supposed to be exit through attaining moksha. Yeah, that's why you exit this material reality by living in a certain way. But just to give us an idea what it means when you're eternally in this cycle of samsara or reincarnation, then we have looked now finally as the concept of the guru. We have seen that the word guru, what this actually means, that it's actually a very sacred and beautiful term, the guru. There's different ways of looking at the guru. There is different stages of guru, like you have different teachers in life, and the spiritual master is essential for the final spiritual upliftment. The Satguru, which will sooner or later, when sincerity awakens in the heart, encounter or come in the life of a devotee, of a seeker. And yeah, so we have presented different concepts. This was the second part. Like I said, we have concluded that part. Next week we're gonna have a look on the scripture of Hinduism, a summary on those, that we get an idea of those. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something, maybe got inspired about something, or something made you think about something. If you have questions, put them in the comments. If you like it, give it a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you get to know when we make another video. And yeah, feel free to share it with everybody. We have, after few requests, decided to leave the videos online, so they will not be just online for 24 hours. They will stay now online for longer, and so you can easily watch them and share them with friends and family. And in that sense, I wish you a nice evening and all the best.